Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of CampusCare EdTalks. I, Sakshi Jain, host for the show, would like to invite you and welcome you all for this educational EdTalk platform where educators and leaders come on board and express their viewpoints related to education and society. Our topic for discussion is student suspension or expulsion. Does it help? And to express their viewpoints on the same, we have with us Mr. Rama Mohan Reddy, Principal of Kadapa Public School. A very warm welcome to you, sir. And it's so good to have you here. Thank you for sparing your precious time, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
To start off with the session, I would like to ask, sir, that what are the effective ways of maintaining decorum at school?
Right. First, we need to understand a decorum. What do you mean by decorum? So, generally, every school wants to maintain a discipline among the students. So, when I say discipline, so showing obedience to the teacher's questions, showing obedience towards the activities of the class, and at the same time, whatever the work assigned by the teacher to the students, whether it is related to academic, whether it is related to co-curricular, whether it is related to extracurricular or sports, that is to be completed by the student. That is to be followed. The main thing is that whatever the teachers have instructed to the students, students are supposed to follow those instructions. The following the instructions as it is given by the school or teachers, that is following a discipline. That so if a student is following the discipline with good habit, good etiquette, that we say that decorum. For that purpose, a school is supposed to organize all those things properly. When I say organizing, so what we are supposed to organize? If you take an example of a classroom, so all the classroom benches and everything is to arranged properly. So at the same time, we need to give some space to the student as well. Because in a student, if you take 25 or 30 students, there will be with of different mindsets. At the same time, we need to give little freedom for the student to express their views, to express their opinions. So once all these things need to be organized by the teachers in the classroom. So when a student is not given any space to express their views, they feel that uncomfortable. Their minds will think in different ways. That means we should not stop. So that is the reason we need to organize our lecture, our classroom, everything in an appropriate. And at the same time, next one is that we should be empathetic. Being a teacher, being a class teacher, being a coordinator, being a principal, always we should be empathetic towards student. Means we need to understand their problems. So once we give this sort of space, once we are empathetic for the student, students will come forward to express their views, to share something with us. That we need to be very careful. That's one thing. The next one is that we need to encourage. We need to encourage the students for betterment of their academics, for betterment of their behavior. Right. So these are all the things need to be done before following a decorum.
Absolutely, sir. An interactive session with student and teacher is what we really need, and it is utmost required to maintain a disciplined and a decorum class.
Absolutely.
Sir. Yes.
Absolutely.
Sir. So, do you agree with the suspension or expulsion policy by altogether? Should students get counseling or warnings before getting this severe punishment, or is it just like, it should happen to, there are certain serious cases, there are cases which can be laid off. So how do you go about it?
Right. Suspension of a student or expulsion of a student. Okay. Even sometimes if the things go beyond limit, some people say that restigate us. Okay. First, understand what is suspension. So there is a slight difference between suspension and expulsion of a student. So we need to understand what is the meaning of suspension of a student. Suspension of a student means removing student or stopping a student from doing a particular thing. Means we are stopping or we are taking back of his privilege. Right. That is suspension. That. So before discussing about suspension of a student, will it be helpful or the right decision? We need to understand few things. That generally every school wants to promote good behavior among the students. When I say good behavior, so it means he has to do all the things in a proper way. He has to follow the instructions. When I say to follow the instructions, have we publicized all those instructions? When I say the school has created an awareness among the students about the rules and regulations. The main thing is that do's and don'ts, and we need to explain the good behavior. See, here, every school has to set up certain behaviors, certain standards, which will help the students to follow. And by the same time, if they follow those things, and it will become, learning will become easy for the students. Demonstrating an activity in the classroom will become easy for the teachers. So it means interactive sessions will go very happily. There should be happy learning, but not forceful learning among the students. So for this purpose, I suggest always, before going for suspension of student, we need to educate the student about our rules and regulations. Because we are not supposed to take any punishment to the students. There are certain standards to be maintained. At that time, we need to mention the rules and regulations. We need to mention the standards, and at the same, we need to educate the students. Don't follow certain instructions. If you don't follow certain standards, if you don't follow certain rules, what could be the action? That we need to educate them, which is very, very important. And at the same time, as you rightly said, that counseling also will be helpful. Before going for suspension, we need to counsel the students. That's what especially CBSE emphasis on that. Counsel the students. That's the reason every school should have one counselor compulsorily. That we need to understand what are the problems. We don't know that whether it is a residential school or a day school. We don't know what is the background of the student. So first we need to understand the background of the student. For that purpose, we need to give some space to the students to express their problems. And at the same time, we need to develop rapport among the students as well. Once we develop rapport among the students, students will come forward to express their problems. When we understand those problems, if we are able to solve those problems, we can solve. Or if the problems can be solved by the counselor, we can refer the candidate or student to the counselor there. So that the counselor also can motivate, can counsel the students accordingly. That is very, very important. And we need to understand the situation. Remember that if a student is not following rules and regulations or decorum continuously, at the time we need to take certain actions, because due to this student, the other students should not get suffered. That is also our responsibility to take care of that. At that time, we used to follow. We, in the sense, if you see that hockey or football, something like that, they show different cards, like yellow card, red card, something like that. So like that, we need to warn. We have to give some warnings. So if it goes beyond, yes, then we have to go for an extreme situation, that is suspension. So that also, remember that once we give such type of suspension, from which area he or she was suspended, from not attending classes, or not attending from school, or not attending sports activity, or not participating in co-curricular or extracurricular activities. Because there are some students who are good at sports activities, but he is not good at academics. So if he is disturbing the class continuously, we can warn him by saying that if you repeat this again, we're not going to allow you to participate in sports activities. This will trigger in his mind that if I don't follow this one, definitely that will be have an impact on my sports activity. So it means we're creating some awareness among the students to make realize not to do and all these things. That's one thing, right?
Absolutely, sir. So it is just like, you have to understand whether which way you have to go forward, whether it should be a suspension, what I feel is, sir, counseling also helps. So whenever we are giving red flags, like you mentioned that there are sports which gives you various sort of flags, red flag, yellow flag, green flag. So I think counseling also helps, and will make an betterment towards how a student should be dealt with when he's showing certain amount of signals, which is moving to another question is, so do you think suspension and expulsion of students is the correct way to handle students breaking the breach of conduct?
Yes. Uh, once we follow all these things, whatever discussed so far, it means we need to promote good behavior, and we explain the students about good behavior, and we explain what are the consequences if you don't follow all these rules and regulations, something that. So even though, despite of explaining, despite of creating, of saying everything from the students, if students are not following those instructions, and at the same time, we need to go with counselors also that assisting the student to counseling sessions, okay, in respect to schools. Instead of doing all these things, if students are not following the instructions, definitely go for suspension of a student for 1 week or 10 days, something like that. But at the same time, when classes or we need to decide that one. So if a student is suspended for a week from not attending classes, that only. But at the same time, if the student is suspended attending
Sir,
sports
sir,
activities, we need
sorry
to
to
go
cut you
with
in
that
between. Is there a
meeting.
possibility that we can have a better connection from your end, because there's a lot of disturbance and a lot of connectivity issues midway? So are you with us? I guess, guys, there's a lot of connectivity issue from his end. We're just waiting for him to get back. Meanwhile, you can subscribe our channel and hit the bell notification, hit the bell icon to have a notification from our side. We run a lot of events which are very very entertaining, insightful, and informative at the same time. We'll just check and we'll just see whether he gets back to us or not. Meanwhile, guys, we were talking about suspension and expulsion of students, which is the correct way to handle, the breach of code of conduct. Or recently we discussed that, how to go about it. And one good and very, nice way to handle this suspension and expulsion is just to have it the way counselors deal it. So once you think and figure out that a child is possessing certain sort of behaviors, and which may come up with certain things, I would suggest to address that to counselors. So are we back with connective good connections? So I guess you're on mute, so could you unmute yourself, sir?
Uh, Ma'am, actually, it is showing problem is at your end because it's showing a red and a green. Just you check, ma'am. It's
No
fine with
worries, sir,
me,
you can
and
continue.
especially your end, ma'am.
No worries, sir, you can continue.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Right. So, if once we follow all these things like promoting good behavior and explaining everything to the students and what could be the consequences when they don't follow certain policies or rules and regulations, then definitely we can go ahead with suspension policy. But at that time, we should be very clear to the student that you are suspended from academic activities, or you are suspended from co-curricular activities, or you are suspended from what is a sports activities for a period of 2 days, 3 days, or 1 week something. After discussing the same thing with the school's disciplinary committee along with the parents. Right. It means we here the main objective of any school is to make students to realize about their responsibilities as well.
Absolutely, sir. Truly
Yes.
said, sir. Coming to our, final question. Other than suspension or expulsion, do you think detention is the right step to deal with students breaking the rules?
To be honest, to say that I'm against to the policy of detaining the students. Okay, because the detention of a student is mainly will become a loss of 1 year. Okay, if a student is good at academics and he is not following certain rules and regulations, so I don't think so. Detaining a student is a good way that instead of that we can follow these. Suspension is a better one that because 1 week or 10 days, if he is suspended from not attending classes or different activities, that okay, he can realize his mistake, and definitely we all human beings we can learn something from the mistakes. So detaining is not a good policy, which I believe.
Absolutely, sir. Thank you. So this is what insights that we have, sir. So what, sir? According to you, a single counselor is enough for the this counseling session for students, since there are so many students and it's by CBSE that we have just one counselor for every school, which is very essential. Do you think it justifies having one counselor in one school with so
No,
many students?
having one counselor in one school is depending upon entirely the school strength. Okay, what I believe that for every 500 students, 400 to 500 students, there should be one counselor, because we will not have behavioral problems with all the students. Generally, we will be having behavioral problems very less. So that's the reason, on an average, if any school is having approximately 400 to 500 students, they should have one counselor is sufficient. If the school strength is beyond 800, something like that, there should be two counselors that. So depending upon the school strength, we have to go with the counselors that.
Absolutely, sir. Thank you so much, sir, for sharing all the insights and all the views related to your experience, and coming up with different ways of telling us in detail what exactly suspension is and how should we go about expulsion or suspension in details. It was a very nice session with you, sir. Thank you so much for sharing that. We'll see you on the other side with yet another episode of Campus Care Ed Talks. Thank you so much and have a
Thank you,
nice
thank you so
evening.
much. Thank